I'm Elisabeth Vincentelli, and I write theater reviews and features for the New York Times.
And I'm Peter Marks, former theater critic for the Washington Post and the New York Times, playing it straight today. Welcome to another edition of Marks and Vincentelli, where we cover all the news you need to know about the world of the stage.
I'm going to say all the opinion. All the opinion you need to care about.
No, not just the opinion.
Well,
I am no longer an opinion journalist. I am a podcast host.
Well, okay, that's the same. Today it's a very special episode because it's just the two of us. And Peter came up with an idea that, it's all about me, so of course I liked it. And
it's going to be in French.
It's going to be in French. And it's actually a question. Did you hear that a lot of people asking, like, how do you write reviews? Like, where do you start? And we're going to talk about specifically how a review happens. And even more specific than that, actually.
Yes, we're going to talk today about the art of the negative review. And we're going to talk about it in a sense of, not wanting to talk just about delicious pans or things that where, you're just sort of raking over the coals for the delight of people, their carnivorous need to see things hurt. We're really going to talk more about the kind of notice that is, I would say, a helpful pan. It's really an essential part of how I think the arts world, the performing arts world, the theater world receives, converses about, and tries to understand a work of art.
So it's not a séance with John Simon. That would have been fun too.
Yeah. This is not a worship service for slash and burn reviewing.
No.
But it's a sensitive issue.
Oh yeah.
How this happens, and we get asked about it a lot as reviewers. Certainly in terms of how one navigates a world where you're rendering judgments, and the world is not always particularly receptive to criticism. And I thought it was really worth talking about. This was all sparked by what I thought of as an artful example of what we're describing by Elisabeth herself. In the New York Times recently, she reviewed a new play that's running at Lincoln Center Theater called Five Models in Ruins, 1981, by Caitlin Saylor Stevens. The review possessed for me some of the qualities that I think of as thoughtful in the way of rendering judgment on a work. And that in this case, I would dare say Elisabeth felt needed more work.
And yet, by the way, I think we need to make clear that you're still going to see the show.
I am, and I will say that this review, one of its virtues, not to embarrass, Elisabeth gets a little bit uncomfortable with a lot of praise, so I'll keep it to a minimum. But this is the kind of review that actually made me want to see the show, even though she had problems with the show. Elisabeth, I'm putting words in her mouth.
Well,
but that's to me the delight of a well-written review.
I'm very happy about that, actually, because I think this show has some things to appeal to some people. It doesn't work to me, but I'm glad that you're still going to see it. So
I was going to see it because I was intrigued by some elements of it. I was more intrigued, actually. I mean, certainly because Beth Marvel is one of the main actors in it. That made it very juicy for me. But I became more intrigued after you described and sort of deconstructed some of the issues with the play, which made me think, now I'm armed for it. I'm ready for this experience. So anyway, welcome to Marks and Vincentelli, Elisabeth Vincentelli.
Yes, that's right. Welcome, Peter Marks.
I'm your interlocutor interrogator for today. Just to set this up for listeners, Elisabeth.
Right.
Yeah, this is a thing I would ask anybody who, and I don't know if I've ever asked this of you, but how long have you been reviewing?
What, in general, or
yeah,
oh my God, wow, gosh, like I think we're counting not in years but in decades at this point.
So where did you get your first review published?
Oh my God, I don't remember. Must have been some place in France. But
Your
no, it
first
was
review was in French.
Yeah. I was writing in French back then.
Amazing.
And then I switched to the language of my favorite science fiction novels.
Was that after you went to school here?
Yes, I wasn't writing in English before I went to school in the US. I went to college in Paris, but then I went to grad school in the US. And that's when I started, and I was like, how can I get free stuff? So I started writing. I started writing for the college paper at Rutgers, New Brunswick.
And you were not far from where I grew up,
Right.
Elisabeth.
I was
grew up
living in
East Brunswick.
Highland Park in a basement.
Oh my God, that's amazing. We have to reminisce at some point about
Yes.
our days in Central New Jersey.
Oh my God.
But I just wanted to just give people a context for the depth of your own experience here. But so tell us briefly about the play Five Models in Ruins, 1981. What's it about? How much did you know about it when you walked into the Clairtau Theater?
Well, it's actually a rare case where the title is exactly describing the central premise. It is about five models, as in supermodels or models of various superness, and they're in a decrepit, what's described in the script as a European estate, but it's in Britain. So I'm sure the Brits might argue whether that counts as European or not. But anyway, and it is in 1981. So here you go. And then there's a very important sixth character who is a photographer. The photographer who's tasked with shooting those models in 1981, because the idea is that the concept for the photo shoot is that they are wearing the wedding gowns that Diana, who's waiting, takes place a little earlier, before the play. So the models are wearing the wedding gowns that Diana rejected for a wedding. And that's the idea behind the shoot. And the photographer, who's played by Elisabeth Marvel, tells the models, it's going to be a big deal. It could be, it could be the cover for October Vogue. So they're all very excited. And that's like the basic setting.
So did you read the play before you saw it?
No, I don't read new plays before I
Why?
go. Well, number one, usually we don't have
Right.
it.
Right.
But even in some rare case, we do have them, and I don't like. I like being surprised, and I like not reading too much about it. So I pretty much only knew what I just said, except for the detail about the gowns, what they're going to wear, because that's revealed in the play.
Right.
But I only knew the very basic setting and time and the cast.
And how much time before you went did you know you were going to be reviewing? I mean, you're like planning a week or two ahead?
I always go in knowing that I'm going to review or not.
Got it.
So I know, because I watch a show very differently. Like, for instance, I don't take notes if I'm not going to review it. But if I review it, I take a lot of notes, actually. And often I don't actually even reread them. But the fact that I wrote it down kind of, does something to my brain.
I have the same. It's so interesting to hear you say that, because I've often felt as if it defines my reason for being there. And it's a different reason than enjoyment. That may account for how I experience it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it's not. It having that pad and the possibility of writing something down just puts you in a different frame of mind.
Yes. And actually, the one thing that's important when I take my notes is I usually, if there's lines that I want to quote, I write down a couple of words so then I can search for them in the PDF of the script.
Right.
So I don't write down the quotes, but then I remember and I write QTE, quote.
You do.
So I remember that I have to, I write QTE, so I remember to look up those two words that I may or may not want to quote, but that for some reason, those words, there was something about that moment that I found interesting. I think, that could be a good quote. And actually, almost every time I end up quoting the one, so I kind of know exactly, you kind of know there's like a line or two that somehow, it's not that they're necessarily witty or but it kind of like works to illustrate the point that is kind of forming in my head as I'm watching the show.
Okay, so this is fascinating to me. This moment.
Why, you don't do that?
No, I do, but I always wondered about how other people do it. Obviously, I mean, and people whose work I respect and really can learn from. And I just wonder how much we have these parallel processes. So the play starts. You're getting used to the world. You're trying to. What goes through your mind? Is it mostly about trying to understand, what the plot is, or if there is a plot? What the structure is? I mean, what's the...
Yeah, pretty much. Like I'm watching a show like anybody would watch a show. I'm watching the show thinking, where is this going? And in this particular case, Five Models in Ruins 1981, it's one of those shows where when you come in, so there's no curtain, so you see the set. The set is opulent. And it's at LCD3, which is the smallest space at Lincoln Center. And the set it's very wide. It's kind of a little shallow, but it's very wide.
It's like 100 seats, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very,
I think it's 120,
it's tiny, but
like
the stage is actually kind of big-ish.
Right.
But it's very wide.
Right.
And the set takes up the entire stage, and it's really very realistic, kind of, decrepit estate. With the left looks like there's like almost marshes, like a marsh. It feels very Easter. Like, in fact, at first I thought it was taking place on Long Island. That's why I thought, immediately I thought, like, that's why I have a Grey Gardens joke in my review, because I thought, is this Grey Gardens?
Interesting.
It has that vibe.
Interesting. So, though, that's an important point. The things like the reference points in the play sort of can remind you contextually of other things you've seen, or even in the culture that might be useful to relate to people, to have them understand, the world you're trying to describe.
And then there's another important thing that happens as the audience takes their seat, is that Elisabeth Marvel is already on stage. So she's already on stage as people are filing in and taking their seats and looking at their programs. And she's kind of on stage. And so she's playing the photographer, and she's wearing this kind of very severe outfit. And she has this severe bob. And she's kind of puttering around, and she's putting up the lights. Like, she's doing the prep work that a photographer would do. She's putting up lights. She's moving furniture around, looking kind of absorbed in her work. And I love Elisabeth Marvel. So I'm like, okay, well, this is good.
You're intrigued
it's
by
looking
her.
good. I'm intrigued. I'm like, okay, I'm looking forward to this, for this to begin. And so I think that's important. It's a very different thing from when suddenly a curtain opens and you're in. Like this one, you sit in and you look at it. And in fact, I'm always surprised by how few people, when this happens, it's not a very, original device. Like we've seen that many times, but I'm always surprised looking around how few people actually are looking at what's happening on stage.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did you remember that show that Isabelle Huppert did at the Atlantic? Was it The Father of the Sun? It was one of those Florian Zeller shows where also she was sitting on stage, not moving, when people were taking their seats, and we were convinced that she was actually flipping the finger at the audience, because the position of her hand, she had like that finger. She wasn't moving or anything, but it was just on her, crossed legs on her knees.
Right.
And we were like, is her finger like, but anyway.
Yeah, well, and that made me think of Jessica Chastain in A Doll's House,
right,
who's for 30 minutes before the show is on a turntable, seated blankly, just revolving. And, sometimes that freaks me out, because I'm you're exposed to it for enough time to wonder, what am I supposed to be thinking about this? And as a critic, what smart thing am I supposed to come up with to describe this and make it understandable as something as an artistic decision that helps me understand the play?
Oh, actually, there's an important detail that I think is worth mentioning. But usually when you go in, you know how many words you have.
Right.
And that is going to be a different way to write a review, when you can go into detail, or you have the space to describe this, you have the space to go into it. And this one, I knew I had 600 words, which is not very much.
Right.
I mean, it's fine. But so when you have 600, you really have to think big picture, and you can't quote that much, and you can't get into details about the sound, you can't.
The tangents are going to be limited.
Yes. So when you already know that going in, you're going to think differently.
But I also think that that's I think that muscular writing, I mean, and a discipline to write in a compressed way, 600 words is a good length to be able to organize your own thoughts about a show.
Back when the New Yorker had the talk of the town blurbs, they cut that, but those were like, I think they were 140 words. And I did a lot of them. And my first one, I think it took me something like 9 hours to write it. I could not, it took me I can't, it was absurd how long it took me to write 140 words because I had never done it that short. And it was really hard. I would say if you're listening to this and you want to do an exercise in thought, you try to review a play in 140 words. Whoa, it's really hard. And then once your mind get into that very specific length, then it was much easier. But that first one was hell.
I bet.
It was so hard.
So at this particular production, we know, and we're gonna do a little bit of reading from your review.
Oh my God.
But at what point are you persuaded that you understand your response to the play qualitatively? How far in does it have to go? And it might be very different from show to show. But but in this case, when did you start to feel? I'm talking about in terms of the length of time that this was not going to be a review where you're going to sing about the show.
Well, you're right. It changes with every show. Like some shows you know immediately, and others it takes a while because it's a little on the fence. And this one, I would say I knew within 15 or 20 minutes that it was not going to improve. But as we're going to get to, there is a kind of plot twist at the end.
Right.
Not a little, but something happens at the end of the play that completely like kind of jolted me back into it. And I have no evidence for this, but I think it was a playwright who did not know how to end her play. And we've seen that, let's have them all sing together or have a big dance off or like, they don't know how to end the play. That's it. They're all going to start singing or like a wild dance. Yep. Don't know how to end the play. This is the equivalent of that. I feel like the playwright did not know how to wrap it up. There was no exit strategy for the play. There's an on-ramp. That's when Elisabeth marveled, but there's no off-ramp to that highway. So the off-ramp was pretty much crashing into a wall. That's one exit strategy. It actually worked for me because I like crashes. So
that's an important point. We can actually enjoy a play that's messy. They don't have to all be well made. We even went through a period where I think that was almost derogatory to talk about a well made play. But there are elements, and you point them out in this play that kept you intrigued. And as you say, and I think that was probably a very useful moment for you to realize you could use that when to be able to highlight something positive, because we do find that readers often get turned off if it's relentlessly negative, or if it just feels like it's a complaint.
Well, one of the biggest compliments I got about a review actually was someone complaining. They were like, I couldn't tell if you liked it or not, the show. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I liked it or not. I really don't know. There's some shows where you really, like, do you remember I think we did an episode about the idea of it's not good, but it's kind of great.
Right. Yes. Right.
And I really like that feeling.
Yes.
Like something, it's not technically good, but you're going to remember it. And that's exactly what happens at the end of that play. But we can get to that. But that kind of flipped. Not enough for me to give it a critic's pick, because what preceded was just not very good.
Well, that's an important point. I mean, just to for listeners who are familiar with reviewing at certain organs, they have ways of flagging to you specialness with certain productions, and at the Times it's called a critic's pick.
Yes.
Sometimes there's a star rating. Obviously, at Time Out, for example, where Elisabeth used to work, there's a star, 1 to 4.
I think they have 4 or 5. I can't remember. I think it's 5, maybe.
All right. So you experience this play. The applause happens. Probably the required standing ovation, I assume.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. What's your first thought? You leave Five Models in Ruins, 1981, and you think, what?
Well, okay, so there's two schools on that. I don't know if you read that thing. The Times, they do that Times behind the scene where they talk to journalists about how they do their. And there was one with my colleague Jesse Green who's talking about his post-show routine. He doesn't talk to anybody about the show. He really keeps all his stuff. Whoever I'm with, I'm going to talk about the show. Like, I love sharing. I don't read other reviews,
Right.
or anything like that, but I will talk about with the person I'm with for sure. And so the friend I was with that night is also a friend who's very familiar with Elisabeth Marvel's work, and is very familiar with the, let's say, the off-Broadway scene. So someone who really could understand the codes that the play was functioning in. And we had we had a good debrief on the subway. Not really debrief, but like we were more like exchanging thoughts. But I do think it's important. I don't think my thoughts are that precious that they can't be tainted by someone else's opinion. So
it's part of theater going is to it's not like you're not going in a Skinner box. I mean, it's you're not hermetically sealed.
I totally respect the other approach. I mean, I think it's definitely
whatever
like
works for you.
Preserving whatever works. Me, it works to kind of talk it out with someone. It really depends, because sometimes I go with people who are maybe not. Like this particular friend that particular night knew the milieu and the kind of style of the play well, so it wasn't interesting. And sometimes we just catch up about our families, so it can be we don't even talk about the show. So it can be, or it takes 2 seconds. I don't want to imply that we're spending like the entire subway ride talking about it, because we don't. But
do you write that night?
Well, it depends what the deadline is, but no, because by the time I get back home, it's late, and
Is it good to put it aside for a few hours too? I mean, like that,
Yes, and also then the next day I kind of think about it. But what I try to do is, if I have time, and usually I do have time, I try to write it and then let it sit, and then the next morning I look at it again.
Interesting.
So it's good to have an overnight proof.
There's
like,
something about
good sourdough.
Yeah, something about sleeping on it that, I mean, obviously, once upon a time, critics did not have that luxury.
Right.
It probably, it probably created a whole different vibe in a reviewer's mind about how they were going to.
It's kind of fun. The ones that I've had to review a few Encores productions, and those most of the time are due early in the morning, the next morning. So then I'll start that night.
Right.
Then I sleep on it and I continue in the morning, and I get up really early
Right.
and I try to finish it. But it helps to have that overnight, like sleeping on it is pretty good. And then you realize how stupid the stuff you wrote was. And it's not working at all.
Well, the producers of one producer in particular, Scott Rudin of the Front Page a few years ago, he has this romantic notion that the reviews should run the night of the he had like it scheduled so that the deadline was that night. So you filed right after. Ha ha ha. Anyway, it didn't really catch on. So let's read the first 3 paragraphs of your piece. I'm going to read them. You'll read some more, but I'm going to start because I am, I'm.
Listeners, I reassure you that one, it's a short one. It's only 600 words.
Yeah, no, and it reads really well. I'm going to start. So this is Elisabeth's lead. For most of its 95-minute running time, Five Models in Ruins, 1981, trudges along in a tonally haphazard manner, and then it abruptly delivers an exclamation mark of a scene. Second paragraph, when the women who have gathered for a magazine shoot and the photographer hired to snap their picture erupt into something out of a Greek tragedy a la the Bacchae, Caitlin Saylor Stevens' new play with LCT3 jolts to life. Is it earned? Not really. Does it work? Maybe not dramaturgically, but dramatically? Hell yeah. Third graph. Up until then, the most interesting part of the show had been watching the always compelling Elisabeth Marvel look intense as Roberta, a shutterbug in androgynous clothes and a bob haircut with one side rakishly pulled behind an ear. The play mentions the 1978 thriller Eyes of Laura Mars about a clairvoyant photographer, but Marvel gives an Eyes of Lydia Tarr vibe. So that's how this starts. Yes. I love that very clever pairing of Eyes of Laura Mars and Eyes of Lydia Tarr, but you also obviously have to know about a certain movie to get that.
Yes. Well, I wasn't sure how much explaining I should get, but actually, originally that joke was Marvel gives an Eyes of Laura Tarrs. That's how I wrote it. And then in edit, they were like, it doesn't really work.
That's funny.
So I'm not a comedian. So as you may have noticed. So that the Eyes of Laura Tarrs, with the accent on Tarrs, of course, became the Eyes of Lydia Tarr, so people would, because they were concerned that it would look like a typo.
Right, and you're referring obviously to the Cate Blanchett movie, which was so...
Yes, Tarr. So it became the Eyes of Lydia Tarr, because in fact, I thought that's where it was going when we first saw her, because she is very much looks like a Lydia Tarr kind of character. It doesn't quite go in that direction. And by the way, I think we can give can we give spoilers about what? I think we can, right?
Course.
Okay. So yeah, it doesn't go in that direction really, because she turned out to be a very sentimental, she's pining after her editor, her male editor. In fact, she's pining for her editor, and one of the models says, "Who was she?" Something like that. And she was like, "It's a him." And models are like, "What?" much to everybody's surprise. But anyway, so yes, so it's not a Tar-esque touch there.
So, I think holistically in these first three graphs, I would say that, a reader like myself would say, she found interesting things to watch. It didn't, the piece as a whole didn't quite work. And this reviewer is in a very artful way letting us know that there are going to be serious reservations about the play, but that it does have value.
Well, I was wondering, because my first sentence gives, actually the first paragraph, which is 2 sentences, gives 2 very important pieces of information about the review. One is that it is not a positive review, because I say it's
correct,
trudging along in a tonally haphazard manner. So you're like, oh God. But then I say there's an exclamation mark over scene. So if you're in a rush, you could be, okay, it's mixed. And then you move on to the next review. But my hope is that I made you intrigued as to without actually describing what's happening. And that was the trick. Because in my first draft, I was actually describing what's happening in that scene. And then I thought, well, I'm kind of ruining there a little bit. So I've got to figure out a way. And even comparing it to the Bacchae is saying a little bit too much, but I figure, let's try to do that. And maybe there's still enough mystery as to what's happening that people will be intrigued.
Yeah. The one thing I'd ask you is, so trudges is the first verb. So that's a very important guidepost. It's where, when I see that as a practiced reader of reviews, I get a certain, it's telegraphed to me pretty clearly that this person had concerns. That even if there was some stuff like the exclamation mark of the scene, this is not going to be a critic's pick. Right.
I mean, you pretty much already know that it's not a critic's pick. So then you have to build the fact that, and also what I'm saying is that something does not have to make sense in a traditional manner or to be earned or, to work dramatically. When that scene happened, my friend, actually, I would say, my friend and I certainly did, but I would say the entire audience, suddenly, you could feel people, leaning in, and they're, we were looking at each other like, what? It was really pretty funny. I was laughing. I was just, what the, okay, all right, so we're doing this, okay, that, where basically, okay, I'm going to say because it's kind of fun. So this is big reveal, and all the tension that had been accumulating, very grinding along, explode and they start like screaming and writhing and yelling and sobbing. And they have this total meltdown, all 6 of them, the models and the photographer. And there's a lot of writhing and they're like, just like it's this cathartic explosion of just like insanity. And, they're like one step away from like covering their faces in ashes. And it's just like this wailing and it is so different from the rest of the show. And it comes out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a tiny little epilogue and then it ends. But I was just like, what is going on? And I do like shows where I'm wondering what is going on, and I'm kind of like standing up straight in my seat. I'm like, oh, this is good. I'll always go for that.
You don't need to have your hand held.
No, I don't. I actually like when there's something a little like chaotic. I was just at the break this weekend and I saw a show called Ants that I quite liked. And there's also one of those like hairpin turns into a kind of absurdity. And I felt, oh, I'm liking this. Like what perverse mind thought of this? This is great, All
right. So you've set up the thrust of your review. Would you read us the next 3 graphs?
Yes. So Roberta has gathered the models at a dilapidated estate that seems to be in Britain since at least one character flew to Heathrow. It is superlatively rendered in chiaroscuro decrepitude by the set designer Afsun Pejufar and the lighting designer Chassis. Everybody is there to capture what Roberta says. It's important detail here. What Roberta says will be the cover of Vogue's October issue. She has a great concept too, the gowns Princess Diana rejected for her recent wedding. This echoes a real photo shoot conducted by Deborah Turbeville. Next graph. The whole enterprise feels a little ragtag for what's supposed to be a prestige assignment. Roberta's assistant isn't there, she explains, because she doesn't like men on set, unless she's shooting them. But why would she have a male assistant then? This is just a harebrained way to explain why Bobby, as she's sometimes called, is running around alone. As for the hair and makeup person, she was out partying the previous night, and she's AWOL. Clearly, the place doesn't just look like a Grey Gardens annex. It's run like one as well. Okay, next graph. Roberta's subjects are at different stages of their careers. The wide-eyed Grace, Sarah Marie Rodriguez, is on the first rung of the ladder. Nearer the top is Chrissy, Stella Everett, a blonde alpha who claims to have bedded half of the rock and hard world stars on both American coasts.
I really love the description here. What I also really like is the modulating, the going back and forth from a plot point to something that you suppose or you draw from the plot on your own. You do a little bit of detective work. You explain to us, where it might be just by the basis of where one character flies to.
The Deborah Turbeville thing, honestly, I didn't know about. But in the script, there is an epigraph. That's a quote from Deborah Turbeville. And
that's
I
how you knew
the name. I knew the name. So I Googled her just to see. Like, first of all, I Googled her to see what she looked like because I was wondering if Elisabeth Marvel was made to look like her, right? But she does not, Deborah Turbeville does not look like Elisabeth Marvel in the play at all. So it's not like this obvious. But then when I was Googling, what Deborah Turbeville was doing around those years, just out of curiosity, because also I quite like her style. So I started getting into like a Google rabbit hole of like Googling Deborah Turbeville. And that's when it emerged that she had done that. Because this is not mentioned in the PR description, or anything. So that made me curious. And then there was another clue because when I was Googling also I had never seen anything by the playwright. So I was looking her up as part of my little research. And I noticed that there was a version of a resume from like 3 years ago that listed a play called Turbeville from 2022, which was not produced. And then I was like, oh, I've got to ask if that was a different play or the same. Because this is when I was really worrying about like making a factual mistake about, was it earlier? So it turned out that it was just like a working title for what became 5 Models in Ruins 1981. And so clearly at one point, the shorthand for that play was Turbeville. So there clearly was a connection. And there's like very little allusions to Deborah Turbeville's work in the play. But the main one obviously is the Diana
Interesting
photo shoot.
So that means that like some of what you glean for your review comes after you've seen the show.
Oh, yeah, in that case, yes, because I did not know that
It's
going
interesting.
in.
No, I think that's really helpful. I wondered, like, so when you're writing, when you're taking notes, does Grey Gardens appear in your notes? Does Tar appear in your notes? Do your
Grey Gardens, I thought about it right away because of the set.
and did you write that down?
Yes.
So okay, so there's interesting because those are the things as a reader, I makes it intrigues me. The connections help me see what I would like to experience myself. Those things really help me want, and so it doesn't have to be that everything works completely perfectly.
Right.
If I'm considering my own attendance.
Well, it's also setting the expectations of the audience. And by the way, the two jokes, the eyes of Lydia Tarr and the Grey Gardens annex joke were both in my notes. So I thought of them when I was watching the show. And I would say that's the case with almost every joke that I have in a review. I think about it when I watch the show. I would never think of that if it's not happening in front of my eyes. So yes, so that's in my notes.
So we're going to skip over one graph because we just want to keep this on. But
Yeah.
I'm going to read the last three graphs of the piece. You can tell this is a very this is a tight review. Most of the play, I love this line. Most of the play consists of the model's striking poses in Vasilia Zivanich's costumes and trading banter, both exaggeratedly arch, while Roberta busies herself moving props and readying her cameras, and jagged post-punk riffs boom between scenes. A lot of great verbs here. Morgan Green's production certainly looks opulent, in contrast to a threadbare plot that heavily relies on peacocking and petulance. Nice alliteration. She doesn't have the bone structure, Chrissy says of Tatiana. She's Eastern European, Alex shoots back. She's literally made of bones and structure. Sandy, a weary latecomer, played by Madeline Wise, arrives just in time to add a few blasé bon mots. Example, exhaustion makes me genuinely kind, unquote. Last graph. But the quips don't add up to much. Roberta, in particular, remains a cipher throughout much of the show. When we finally learn what was driving her and what was making her so mopey, one of the revelations comes way too late, while the other feels pedestrian. Having painted herself in a corner, Stevens, that's the playwright, then goes nuclear. I certainly will remember the explosive ending. So there's a nice tying up that echoes the lead.
I have to admit, I do like doing that.
Well, it's a great device that we all, we know that
is a device.
Gives a sense of completion. Did you? So when you look at this review and what you came to, there's a lot of sharp writing in it. Is that are you inspired sometimes by the quality of the writing in the play to come up with a comparatively spicy way of writing yourself, or do you think that's just your style?
No, I think that's just my style. I don't think I have the technique to, like you have Adam Feldman who writes a review of Pirates, the Penzance musical, in the style of a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. Like I could never do that.
Right.
Like I don't have that.
Right.
Like that, my brain doesn't work that
Sure.
way. I just could never. He had written a review of, I think it was like an Alice in Wonderland theme show, and he had done it in the style of Lewis Carroll. I could never in a million years do that. It's just not the way my brain thinks.
Obviously there are all kinds of ways of creative ways of writing. Did you feel when you finished? Interestingly, I think it's interesting that you took the moment that you decided to settle on at the end of the piece almost left me with the feeling she wants me to know that there are worthwhile things in this play.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, well, that's exactly it. I didn't want to do an outright entirely negative review because I do try to find things that are encouraging, and also I do modulate in terms of like if it's on off or on Broadway, because I think for the prices, people pay for on Broadway, they really do deserve something like, but I definitely cut more slack off Broadway. And I don't mean that it's not patronizing at all, but I think you're going in with different expectations if you paid $30 or if you paid $900.
Very true.
And it's important to set that up. So I think, and the great thing with LCT3 is like the tickets are it's the most affordable space at Lincoln Center. I think the tickets are like $33 or $35.
That's what I bought tickets to it.
I mean, seeing Elisabeth Marvel, who's one of our greatest actresses, for $35, I mean, yeah.
Right.
I mean, sure.
Right.
It's funny because the friend I was with that night, after the review ran, we were talking about the show again. And she said, well, that the thing that I allude to, the reveal of what the character's motivation, she was like, well, you could tell Elisabeth Marvel, even she wasn't buying it.
Fascinating.
Like, that's what, like, my friend thought, like, even Elisabeth Marvel could not quite sell that turn, that revelation about the character. She told me that afterward. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think I'd still buy it because Elisabeth Marvel can sell almost pretty much anything.
Right, well, that's acting.
That's acting.
So I guess I just had a couple of questions at it because I've been asked this. So do you think about how this will be received by the people involved?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not. Well, yeah, don't you? I mean, of course I do.
Sometimes.
And I think it's a problem sometimes, actually, because it gets in my head. But, I mean, you don't want to be, like, again, I'm not John Simon.
Right.
And some people might say, yeah, you don't write as well as he does.
You want to be, that's ridiculous, but you want to be true to yourself. And sometimes, that becomes the most important thing. As much as you worry about, people's feelings or if they're going to, be discouraged or, what they take away. Because, as much as we try to be clear in our reviewing, people, they read them differently.
Oh, yes.
Everyone has their own sort of way of like interpreting what you're saying.
Yes.
They either read into it or they misread it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting to think, about how, and some people are total grown-ups about how they receive the information, and some people are, just so insecure or, thin-skinned. There
are plays. I don't think this is one of them, but there are plays where I'm thinking, I can see why some people would like this. It's just not my jam, but I can see why. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's not my thing. I can objectively see why others would. I'm trying to think of a good example of that, but I would say like the Notebook is a great example of that, actually. I think the Notebook, I can totally, which I liked, okay, but I can see why people could really embrace the Notebook with full, emotion. Or Moulin Rouge, I do not like Moulin Rouge, but I can see how it can work for a lot of people.
Right. Yes, and I know exactly what you're saying. I often find that the thing with this piece, and I have not seen the play, is that there are enough touchstone descriptive ideas that you describe that I look forward to seeing how this all meshes or doesn't.
You know what was interesting about this one too? This one hits a lot of it pushes a lot of my buttons in terms of like, it's a lot of stuff that I'm interested in personally in the topic. I'm very not interested in Diana, but I'm very interested in late 70s and early 80s pop culture and this kind of freakish semi-goth, environment. And I'm also very interested in the idea of the fashion photography. I am absolutely not a fashion person, but I am interested in some aspects of fashion, and that's one of them. So I thought, oh, this is interesting, and there's a lot of little references in there. So that's kind of fun little Easter eggs for people who care about that in the play. And so I was wondering am I feeling disappointed because my expectations were maybe a little too high because that's something that interests me. I did wonder about that.
Yeah.
But then I tried to take a step back and I thought, no, I don't think so. And that's something, if you care about something you're interested in, you'll be like, maybe you'll pay a little closer attention.
Well, it's also reassuring, even hearing you talk about this, the amount that you're checking yourself for 600 words on one night out of 365 days, and the amount that you have to be honest with your own sense of who you are sitting in that room and how you look at it. It's a complex process, I think, and I maintain not many people can do that effectively night after night. So it's it's a special skill. I'm not trying to pat us on the back.
No, but I would say it's also a lot of practice. Because your mind.
Totally.
And, I wanted to go back to something I said earlier about like sleeping over. And when I said like when I write something stupid, hopefully I don't write anything stupid, but it's not something stupid as like a turn of phrase that doesn't really capture what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really like refining. And also I really like working with editors and I like being edited. Like this, for instance, this play is full of name dropping and references, which is very fun to me. And I quoted one of the lines in the review. It's not one of the lines we read aloud, but the editor didn't get the reference, which is a reference from the play. It's not my reference. I was quoting from the play, but the editor did not understand why the line was funny. And if you don't know the reference, yes, that line is not funny. So we had to kind of put that quote in a bit of context.
And that's a good test of its relevance. How people
exactly.
are, how much...
Like, who would know this reference?
Right.
Well, if you are familiar with that period, or if you studied post-structuralism,
right.
Which I haven't, but I read, I'm interested in many things. So I kind of got the reference, and I remember laughing out loud during the play. But yes, there's a lot of, it's very referential.
So anything else before we wrap up? Is there anything else about this, about writing this, that strikes you as something you think about after the fact?
Well, I would say that the people who often complain about negative reviews, try writing one about a show you didn't like. See how easy it is. It is the hardest thing to do. Like writing love letters when you love a show, although actually that's actually a different set of challenges.
Sure.
But I would say overall, it's a little easier maybe. Although, it's just differently challenging. But writing a negative review is very hard.
Well, I would say that, anytime you're qualifying your enjoyment or your displeasure, the pivots that requires in terms of your train of thought and how you communicate it is a harder review to write. And mixed reviews, let's face it, are the majority of what you in life. How many great, exhilarating moments are there, and how many absolutely tragic, bottom of the barrel moments are there?
We are walking mixed reviews.
Correct. But I thought this for me was a really instructive review, and when I read it, I thought, this is such a great demonstration of the challenge of tackling a play by a new writer. Who could take something away from this, whether or not she reads it or eventually comes to it. I think it's a helpful response for anyone, and actually it's a great privilege, I think, to get this kind of review from you. So anyway,
I hope so. I try to be you have to manage expectations. You have to manage the play. You have to manage the length of the review. You have to manage a lot of stuff and try to be fair.
Well, thanks for joining us today on Marx and Vincentelli, Elisabeth.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you had me on, Peter. This was such an honor to be with you.
We've had so many guests on, Elisabeth. I just thought it was time we had you,
I've been waiting for the call.
I know.
For what? Like, how many years have I been waiting for that email that said...
I'm sick of your publicist. I'm sorry.
I know, they've been bugging you relentlessly.
Yeah, and it's like that whole team.
My team. Yeah, my publicist kept telling you, like, she has a new one out. And you kept saying she always has a new one out. Like, come on. The novelty has worn off.
Well, listen, this has been really fun. And I hope listeners...
We're going to turn the table and we're going to do like one of your classics. We're going to do one of your classics.
I don't know.
One of your many, many, many pieces about To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, real. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Yes, we could do a whole needling session of each other. We could, they would like a whole private lives kind of deal.
So much material.
Yeah.
No, but I do. By the way, I do like your kind of obsession with To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not joking. I find that like really amazing how you managed to like cover, like that's really remarkable.
It was like a beat. It became a mini beat.
It's really, I love it. I'm not being ironic at all.
Well, I
like
appreciate
it's
that.
really true.
You heard it here first, people.
That's right.
Thank you. And, we'll do something like this again when time allows.
Deep dive.
And we hope you all enjoyed listening to this and getting some peek behind the curtain of how this all happens. So till next time, I'm Peter Marks. Please subscribe to our podcast at marksvincentelli.substack.com.
And I'm Elisabeth Vincentelli, and I write positive reviews too. We're on social media. I'm on Blue Sky. Peter's on Blue Sky, Facebook, and Threads. He's spreading the goods. And we'll be back soon with more bracing theater conversation.